Exactly. I'm now opening the webinar. So I'll be I'll be behind the scene here.
Sure. Thank you. All right. We'll just wait a couple of minutes. Yeah, starting to get a few people joining. All right, so it is officially time now. We'll just give it a couple more minutes in case we have a few people in the process of joining. All right. Should we get started? Yes. All right. Share my screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Fabrice Jain. I'm the Principal Science Officer for Australia's Integrated Marine Observing System. And it is my pleasure today to deliver the final plenary for the 8th Ocean Best Practices Workshop. This year, the workshop aimed to stimulate ocean best practices through dialogues across science, technology, for innovative solutions and effective governance. So over the next hour or so, we're going to look back at the engaging discussions that have occurred over the past 3 days and take a look at some of the key outcomes and recommendations derived from these discussions. So during the workshop, we've heard a lot about the Ocean Best Practices System, OBPS, but what is it? So OBPS, if you're not familiar with it, is a project of the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and is co-sponsored by the IOC and GOOS, the Global Ocean Observing System, and the IODE, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange. Now, the OBPS aims to centralize, promote, and disseminate protocols used in various ocean applications. And the contributions of practices to the OBPS come from a broad range of ocean-focused organizations and are centralized in a global repository available at oceanbestpractices.org. OBPS also offers a peer-reviewed best practice topic in Frontiers in Marine Science, as well as capacity development and user support. And over the last 5 years, these core capabilities have been expanded to include task teams with subjects such as the use of practices in the Global South, ocean governance practices, and practices for ship-based research. The Ocean Best Practices system has engaged early career professionals in these activities and in the management of the OBPS itself. And part of this is an early career ocean professionals ambassador program, which includes participation from 5 continents. Another area is the focus on improved access to practices through the Federation of Methodological Repositories, with the initial work being done in aquaculture applications. And finally, users need guideposts to select and access practices. The OBPS and Goose have created an endorsement process so users can search the repository for endorsed practices. So a question that has been discussed over the last few years is what is a best practice? So to address this, a maturity model defining attributes of good, better, and best practices was recently published in Frontiers in Marine Science. This maturity model defines 5 levels of evolution for ocean best practices. The OBPS focuses on levels 3, 4, and 5, which comprise well-documented practices, practices in use by multiple institutions, and sustained and widely adopted practices. The OBPS repository is being upgraded as we speak to reflect this definition, so you'll soon be able to search for practices according to their maturity level. And if you want to learn more about this maturity model, feel free to have a look at the publication. You've got the reference at the bottom of the slide here. Now, with this background, I now invite you to join me for a short video commentary by Vidar Helgesen, the Executive Secretary of the IOC, which is the home of the OBPS, and Assistant Director General of the UNESCO. So I'll just play the video.
Hi there, I'm Vidar Helgesen. I'm the Executive Secretary of the IOC UNESCO, and I'm delighted to be able to give some closing remarks on this important occasion. Important because standards and best practices are essential for the IOC. They lead to greater efficiency. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can ensure greater compatibility down the information value chain. They lead to better interoperability between data sets, between methods, and greater reproducibility. The identified community best practices and standards can also lead to streamlined regulatory approval and higher funding success. And not least, improved data quality with greater trust in data can also be achieved with known provenance and methods. Improved systems interoperability is another very important dimension across communities, such as ocean observing, carbon observations, cargo flows operators, and along the value chain from observations through data management, modeling, and assessments to service delivery. Standards and best practice improve system-wide interoperability and strength. Now, for the IOC, it is very important to fulfill the needs of member states. We're tightly interwoven with member states. The nature of our organization, of our body, is really a tightly networked system of member state institutions coming together on the IOC platform. And we need to fulfill the needs of member states and our global mandates and their global mandates on climate, on biodiversity, on DRR, on adaptation and coastal resilience. Strengthening our infrastructure, our ocean observing and ocean data system, and have them viewed as the critical infrastructure they are, is very important for us. And we need also to, on the basis of that infrastructure observation, to improve our delivery. We need to focus on users and ocean information and trusted data. And speaking of users and end use, sustainable ocean planning and management is at the heart of what countries need to do to manage oceans sustainably. And for the IOC, it will be very important in the future to support such processes. The ocean is changing, it's changing fast. It's also becoming a more crowded place. And that means that the observation we have, the data we have, and the best practices we distill can really contribute to a more sustainable future for the ocean, for people, and for the planet. This ranges from marine carbon, biodiversity, coastal resilience, sustainable fishing, balancing the continued growth of the ocean economy and the economic use of ocean resources, maintaining and strengthening the resilience of ecosystems at the same time. The concepts of OBPS were outlined in 2017 and adopted as an IOC project in 2019, co-sponsored by IODE and Goose. And there are two objectives that I'd like to recall from the outset. Firstly, to increase efficiency, reproducibility, and interoperability of the entire ocean observing value chain by providing the community with a unified, sustained, and readily accessible knowledge base of interdisciplinary best practices. The second objective that was set is to provide coordinated and sustained global access to best practices in ocean observing, to foster innovation and excellence by developing a system and engaging ocean observing communities in a joint and coordinated effort in producing, reviewing, and sustaining best practice documents. There have been advances in meeting these objectives. The need for best practices is more broadly recognized in the ocean community with funders and within IOC communities, such as the Global Ocean Observing System. There are Goose-endorsed best practices. They have been downloaded more than 6,000 times. There has been work to address capacity and represent diversity of practices from regions. However, we're still some distance from achieving the original aims. For example, there are only a limited number of true best practices identified in the repository, and the balance of practices available is weighted towards the ocean observing part of the value chain. In addition, there's continued work to do in the community to encourage organizations to value best practice creation and focusing on developing a set of IOC core practices to support the delivery of trusted data and ocean information. For the OBPS to serve IOC needs, it is therefore essential that the system builds in such a validation mechanism. The demand for validated best practices in the ocean space is increasing as global focus is increasingly recognizing the importance of ocean science for decision-making at the level of member states, at the regional levels, and in multilateral processes. IOC needs more clearly identified and validated best practices for observing, data management, prediction, indicators, and other information services, and across the practice of sustainable ocean management. These will need to be robust, have a clear review process, and be easy to identify and use. This means three things. Firstly, we need more engagement across the IOC and its communities than currently. Secondly, we need more visibility for the need for best practices to be valued, and this is a culture change issue, really. And thirdly, we need continuing work to understand how the community uses these practices in practice to clearly identify if what we are producing is what the IOC community needs. This engagement across the IOC and its communities is essential. OBPS, as the current home of best practices, must move forward with this clearly in mind. I look forward to engaging with the outcomes of this workshop, and I thank you for the great work you're doing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to, oh, sorry.
Hi there.
There we go. All right. Thank you to Vidar Helgesen again for these inspiring and thoughtful comments. So now let's take a look at the workshop. So we had over 800 people from over 100 countries registered to this workshop, and over the past 3 days, we have run over 25 sessions across various time zones, which gathered over 2,000 views in total. So I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's pretty impressive. It's quite amazing to see the community out there willing to learn and engage on the topic of best practices. The workshop was structured around key themes of the ocean value chain. So we started on day one with a fantastic group of keynotes that provided an overview of the 2030 vision and the role of the ocean best practices system. During days 2 to 4, we then discussed around the broad themes of science, technology, governance, capacity development, and ocean literacy. And today we're at the last plenary that's aimed at summarizing the main outcomes of the workshop, as well as identifying the challenges and solution, and identifying how the OBPS can support ocean practice evolution going forward. But before we go into the details of the workshop and all the discussions, we should appreciate that the OBPS addresses the full ocean value chain. That is a loop of actions that starts from societal needs, identifies the scientific approach for producing marine data and derived information that can be employed by users through applications and services, and creating societal benefits. So the OBPS workshop tried to articulate a set of sessions that fit the scope of the ocean value chain components. So here you have an overview of the 22 sessions run over the past 3 days. We had sessions that pointed out the importance of observing the ocean, but also on modeling it for predicting essential ocean variables using advanced analytical approaches. Both supported by advanced technological infrastructures. We're in the middle of the digital twin era, and that is stressing the need for interoperating and sharing data for multi-purposes. These 3 components are functional for providing services and applications, and we had the chance to discuss some really interesting ones regarding protecting the ocean and so on. And as shown by the value chain, all these components work to produce societal benefits, without forgetting the important role that industry and private sectors play in this as well. And we also touched on various initiatives that are connecting and promoting collaborations across sectors. So altogether, this was a fantastic program. Now, during the opening plenary, if you attended it, you'll remember that we asked you about the main reasons that led you to attend this workshop, as well as what kind of support you would value from the OBPS. So here are some of the results of this survey for us to reflect on. What it provided was insights into the fact that we have existing and new users wanting to learn about the OBPS and the latest developments in terms of ocean best practices and interoperability. You also identified that enabling collaborations is a key area where the OBPS can play a strategic role, as well as supporting the development, endorsement, publication, convergence, and submission of ocean practices. There was a wide range of ocean disciplines represented during that first plenary, spanning oceanography, biology and ecosystems, sensor technology, science communication, and governance. So even though this word cloud shows that it was heavily dominated by physical oceanography folk, it's important to realize that there was quite a wide range of people attending this. Now, we're going to have a bit of a look at the audience today. So we have organized another set of questions through Slido, which is not working. So let's have a look. I'll unshare and share again. The joy of being live. Are we working now? No? All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share my Slido screen directly to get my mouse connected. Apologies for this, folk. All right, you should now be able to see the Slido questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, so if you want to take a minute to scan the QR code that you see on this screen using your phone, or if you don't have a camera on your phone, you can also click the link in the chat provided on Zoom. So we'll give you a minute or two to get onto Slido, and after that we'll start the questionnaire.
Thank you, Fabrice.
No problem. And I'll hand over to Virginie to run this questionnaire.
Yes, no worries. So also just a note, while my move from one question to the other over the session, please note you can keep answering as it will be recorded. Your answer will be recorded in the background, okay? So let's start with the first easy question. Which country are you attending this workshop from? I'll give you a few minutes if there's anybody online answering. Yay.
Australia. Nice. Nice.
Not too late for Germany. That's good. Thank you.
Still a few participants typing. People attending in from the US, which is great. All right. Are we happy moving on to the next question, Virginie?
Yeah, you can go to the next one, please.
All right.
So this is another open question. What area or subject of ocean science is your practice covering? This might be the practice you're developing or evolving.
Nice.
Thank you. So we can go on with the next question, please.
Sure.
Let's keep answering. That's good. Which workshop session, what would be your priorities for advancing best practices in the future? Let's give it some thoughts there, some ideas. There's people typing, but no answer looking. Okay, thanks.
Question that requires a bit of thought, so please take a few
Yes.
seconds.
We can jump on the next question if you want, but just keep answering if you want.
Sure. I'm not sure they'll be in order, Virginie, that's all. Okay. Okay, here we go.
So this is a multiple choice question. Which workshop sessions did you attend over the last few days? Obviously, if you attend more than one session, you can just select all that apply. And please don't forget to press the send or submit button at the bottom of your screen once you're done.
It is a long list.
And I wait a few.
Here we go. Like the Marine Life 2030 session was popular.
Yes.
We're getting answers across most sessions, all of them so far, actually. Oh, so here we go.
Great answers. Well, thank you very much. This closed the first interactive part of this session, and you can keep your Slido open for the second interactive part later on. So now I'll give the floor back to Fabrice to look at the outcomes, challenges, and solutions collected from the sessions we had over the last 3 days. So Fabrice, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Virginie, and thank you for your responses. So let's turn some of the sessions outcomes and recommendations. So during these 22 sessions that were run over the past few days, there was a clear acknowledgement of the need for advancing best practices. There was an acknowledgement of the need for guidelines, standards, shared common terminologies, best practice documentation, as well as more integration across systems, coordination efforts, and so on. We also spoke about interoperability a lot and the definition and adoption of best practices and standards. And some of the key themes were, the need for common vocabularies to support data sharing, streamline data management in cloud-based systems, and so on. We spoke about harmonizing methods from data collection through to quality control procedures, but also the need for tools to help access and process data for easy uptake into models. We touched on innovative solutions, including improving and downscaling models, cloud-based solutions, and creating a digital representation of the ocean systems through the digital twins, as well as the development of user-friendly platforms and the potential for AI applications. There were many discussions focused on capacity building as well, and especially the need to build capacity across multiple sectors. We talked about forming specific task teams, providing training in data processing, and so on. And we also discussed the links between science and policy, and the fact that actionable policy requires the proper interface with science and technology to spread knowledge and yield optimal outcomes. And finally, there were some fascinating discussions about ocean rights and recognizing the ocean as a living entity with intrinsic rights to influence conservation and management policies. So if you attended that ocean governance session, I'm sure you'll relate. That was quite an engaging discussion. We also identified a number of challenges that are currently hindering progress, such as the diversity of methods used to collect, process, store, deliver, and analyze ocean observations, and the need for convergence towards a smaller set of accepted practices. The challenge of updating our practices and resistance to adopting new ways or technologies. The lack of specific data to improve models. A lot of the times the data we have is insufficient, and the data that are needed are in regions that are really hard to observe or for variables where the sensors are not quite reliable yet. We talked about inconsistencies in data and metadata quality assurance procedures and the lack of common vocabularies. The need for a global network of cloud infrastructures, as well as fair cloud-optimized datasets that can be readily taken up in some of those analytical approaches. We spoke about the need for integration across disciplines and scales, and the fact that we're currently operating in very fragmented ways. We also touched on the need for long-term funding to operationalize data collection. In a lot of countries, that's not the case, and a lot of the data collection relies on project-based funding, which is not the way we should go about this. And this underpins the entire the ocean observing underpins the entire ocean value chain, really. We also identified that there are differences in how various groups engage in problem solving in ocean governance and the priorities of policymakers and practitioners that are often misaligned. So we need to find ways to communicate and collaborate effectively for optimal outcomes. And finally, we need to communicate more about the ocean value chain and the fact that ocean data underpin a lot of societal benefits, from food security through to weather forecasting and the blue economy, and many more. These were very productive discussions, and we identified a large set of solutions that can help overcome these challenges, from harmonizing data and evolving technologies through to upgrading the ocean data infrastructure network and emerging analytical approaches, advancing modeling efforts, and ocean governance and policy. And I won't go through the list because it's a large one, but if you scan these points, you'll see that we have a large amount of exciting ideas to explore and pursue in the coming years. We also discussed how the OBPS can support the advancement of best practices and their maturity. We identified that the Ocean Best Practices system could help facilitate guidelines for the development of mature best practices, can also play a key role in linking ocean data sets with the corresponding metadata, which are not always provided and need to be comprehensively documented, as well as the relevant practices for the collection and use of those data. The OBPS has a key role to play as well in connecting communities through enabling networking and collaboration opportunities. And of course, the OBPS should continue to promote capacity building and to facilitate the globalization of best practices and standards in the UN Ocean Decade. The OBPS should also continue to develop task teams with community partners and strengthen connections across a wide community of stakeholders, including policymakers, businesses, and innovators. The OBPS can improve collaboration between scientists, policymakers, industry, and local communities in a number of ways, through disseminating mature protocols for use, convening workshops and other communications, organizing brainstorming sessions involving various stakeholders, connecting experts on specific topics, promoting convergence and the development of common and endorsed practices, as well as forming task teams such as the New Policy Task Team, and promoting data interoperability between agencies and sectors. So to wrap up, here are some of the keywords that were highlighted across all of the sessions ran as part of the workshop. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's great to see topics such as interoperability, standardization, collaboration, capacity building, and communication being so prominent in those various discussions. So next, we're back to Slido. We'd like to gather a bit more feedback from you. So we have another short set of questions. So bear with me as I get back to Slido. Where am I? There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, over to you, Virginie.
Thank you, Fabrice. So welcome to the second interactive part of this session. So in case you left from the first interactive part, please join with the QR code via the link in the chat. I'll wait a minute. Yeah. So what are the limitations in your area to develop a best practice? So is that lack of funding, time, institutional support, collaboration opportunities? Capacity, readiness level.
Funding.
Collaboration opportunities. Readiness level, harmonization. Or reproducibility issues, maybe. Funding is obviously an important issue.
So it's time. It takes time to develop a practice.
Yeah, it takes time. And again, don't forget to press the send button at the bottom of the screen, since it has multiple choice question. All right, thank you very much. Next question, please.
Next question.
So what is your key takeaway from this workshop? So this is just an open question. Feel free to provide your thoughts. Yes, best practice is highly valuable and very needed for many of us.
Starting is hard. That's very true.
And
But
works
the
are
OBPS
in
can help.
progress. Yeah. Yeah. It was really a fantastic opportunities to open up during this workshop. So we can move on to the next question, please. There's basically two last questions, so please keep it up. You have great work there. Thank you. What topic would you like to see being addressed in a future OBPS event? Just provide your great brain ideas there. All ideas are welcome. Don't be shy. Yeah, there's many good topics there. Yeah.
Some great suggestions. We still have people typing.
Uncertainties, that's for sure.
The endorsement process, that's a good one.
Thank you. So that leads us to the last question, which is multiple choice question. And you may have heard early on that OBPS has many capabilities, all right? And perhaps you would be interested in volunteering in OBPS. So please let us know. Yeah.
Yes.
That's good and nice to hear. You can keep providing your thoughts. And thank you very much for your valuable contribution here. It's been great. And now give the
So-
floor to Jay, who will give you an overview of the key priorities and recommendations for OBPS as collected from the community over the last 3 days. So Jay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Virginia, and thank you, Fabrice, for the excellent presentation. I would just like to summarize the ideas that we heard, and I break them into 3 categories: the idea of a best practice, the connection to communities, and finally, steps that we can take together. In the question of the first one, as Fabrice said earlier, we now have a maturity model and also the attributes for various levels of maturity. And we can begin to understand what is really a best practice. And I should add that a best practice includes a practice that's been endorsed. So with that development, it's time now to facilitate guidelines for the development of a mature best practice and work with you, the community. The next area is the community development. And here we're interested in the question of harmonization and collaborative opportunities. And that includes capacity building and ocean literacy for the general public, and maybe even some of us. Facilitating the globalization of best practices through the UN decade, OBPS has a program under the decade which is called Ocean Practices, and we're engaged with a number of the different activities that are going on there. Finally, we look at a wider view of stakeholders. Now we're moving beyond scientists and looking at policymakers, industry, innovators, as well as citizen science and researchers. And how do we bring them in? One of the ways is that we create task teams. Task teams are groups that have common interest, and they want to meet and they want to have an umbrella to meet under. And so we have a number of task teams that we heard earlier from the work of Fabrice today. And one example is ocean governance and science policy. It's not that we're going to do ocean governance, but that we're going to understand the best practices leading to governance decisions and implementation. And so with that, that's a summary. I want to leave you on the next slide with a challenge. We hear many discussions of one ocean. The Ocean Decade says it. Other people are saying it. Absolutely true. The challenge that we have is observing that one ocean. I don't know if you would take the slide as you're seeing it with all the sensors and drawings, which was done by Greg McLean. I want to credit him for that. But I'd have a hard time explaining that to my grandmother. And so I think we need to come to some conclusion of how to define one system that we can all live with and we can all advertise and reach out with. And with that, I'd like to go to the next slide. And thank you very much for joining us. In particular, we're almost a decade into these workshops, and I want to compliment Stefania Ciuberti and Virginie van Dogen-Vogels for an excellent, they actually set the standards for the future. And so I'd like to thank them for that and the team that did the organization and ran the system. Of course, the plenary keynote speakers, the panelists, the moderators also made the program successful. And that includes the session leads, the speakers, and all of us that dived in to work on the topics that we were holding most dear to ourselves. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. I just wanted to note that there are opportunities for you to follow on. If you missed a session, all the sessions will be available on YouTube. And if you want to volunteer, as we were talking about in this Slido, or share any questions you may have, discuss further things of best practice, please feel free to contact OBPS at the mail link below, info@oceanbestpracticesystems.org. And I leave it as a finale that the contributions from you are welcome, always welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay, for this final. And I would like to actually particularly thank you for all the great support that you've been through all this workshop, that's for sure. And Pauline and everyone, and Kat, yeah. I would like to know if there's anybody online who would like to ask questions, or if they if there's anything you would like to discuss in particular from this workshop.
Can we invite them into this particular so they can see each other on the screen?
Oh yeah, we can, if you don't mind, obviously.
How do we do this?
Jose can do that.
Okay, great.
Don't be shy.
Actually, I may be able to do it.
Doing that right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
I'm inviting. Yeah. Well, I invite them all, but most prefer to stay.
That's so good.
I know
But
the
if you
most.
have any questions, any question for the OBPS, please reach out. And I really thank you for your attention.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Friday afternoon anyway. Maybe not for everybody.
Okay, I will wrap up this session. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you so much.